The San Antonio Spurs are about to be absolutely disgusting and just terrifying for the future of the NBA. The writing is on the wall. They're set up in just a perfect situation. And the San Antonio Spurs are honestly in a situation where the only way they don't at least become a very high-level basketball team in the very near future is if they just ultimately fumble this bag in this draft coming up. But if they're able to just do the right things, draft the right players, the Spurs legitimately could become finals contenders in just a few more years and be one of the best teams in the NBA once again and go back to looking like the dynasty San Antonio Spurs we once knew them when they had Tony Parker, Tim Duncan, and Kawhi Leonard and all of them and David Robinson for all of those years. And Greg Popovich may very well be having at the tips of his fingers right now another potential dynasty in the making. And one of the biggest reasons why I think the San Antonio Spurs future is so bright is because of how their current roster is currently set up with so many nice pieces. Obviously leading the entire team is the freak of nature Victor Wembanyama. Okay, Wembanyama is insane. Okay, he's probably, and let's be honest, it is a very real scenario where he wins Defensive Player of the Year next year. The only reason he didn't win it this year is because he was a rookie, and he very much could be a Defensive Player of the Year in only year two. He'll probably make an All-Star game next season. He's probably going to be a perennial All-NBA and All-Defensive guy as well, and let's be honest, is probably on track to be a future MVP candidate in just a few years as well. So Wembanyama is going to be 100% most likely their superstar leader going forward. And the only way I don't see that happening is probably injury. And I mean, if God willing, he can stay healthy, Wembanyama is going to be the face of this league in just a very short amount of time. So having a guy like him on your team is obviously extremely good for your future when you take in the fact that he is only 20 years old. And then, even outside of him, it's still a fairly solid young roster, as you have Devin Vassell, who in my opinion, Vassell has been one of the most underrated players in the entire NBA for a very long time. He's a fringe 20-point per game scorer, he's an extremely solid defender, and he does it on very solid efficiencies as well, and he's doing it at only 23 years old, and he's been putting up those extremely good numbers on fairly bad teams and being the main focus. And now with Wembanyama obviously becoming the main focus, his offense is going to be that much easier because he's now the second option, and I think he's going to greatly benefit playing with a guy like Wemby. And Devin Vassell legitimately has all-star potential, and I think he's going to start getting a lot more recognition as the Spurs get better and better and better, and I think people are going to really start to notice how good he actually is as a player, and I think it is going to be very fun to see, because in my opinion, Devin Vassell is one of my favorite players in the NBA. He's extremely underrated, no one really talks about him, but I think he's extremely good with legit star potential, and hopefully as the Spurs get better and better, and as him and Wembanyama grow in chemistry, they're going to get even better playing together, and people are going to really start to take notice of how good of a player Devin Vassell actually is. And then even the third guy I want to get into is going to be Keldon Johnson. Now, Keldon Johnson's one of the guys on this team. I'm not 100% sure what his future looks like on this team. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Keldon Johnson. He's extremely solid. He can easily give you 20 plus points any night he's on the floor, but with this team, I'm not sure how well he fits. I do think he'll be on the team next year, and probably even for a few years to come, but do I think he's in their long-term future plans? I'm not sure, but there's a very high, just interesting scenario where they can trade him and maybe even get a very solid package in return, because he's only 24 years old, and a guy that can give you 20 plus any night at 24 years old is extremely valuable from a future standpoint if you're trading for him. And even if they decide to keep Keldon Johnson, still a big three of Wemby, Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and whoever they pick in this draft should be extremely fun to watch. And I think even this year, this big three has shown potential at the end of the season to be a fairly formidable team. So I do think that this team in big three that they currently have could be very solid, and they're only going to build upon it from there. And then the last young guy that I'm going to get into in real depth individually is going to be Jeremy Sochan. Now, although I'm not the biggest Sochan fan, I do think he could be an extremely valuable piece on a contending level team. Now, they might have to trade him to get the pieces to become legit contenders. They may keep him, who knows, but I do think he does what you need on a contending team. He plays very hard, he's very athletic, he's an extremely solid defender, he makes hustle plays, he's just not the best offensive player by any means, and his offense leaves a lot to be desired, but if he is your fifth option in a starting five, or even your sixth man off the bench, having someone that comes in play with that high level of energy, is going to hustle, and you know what you're going to get out of him, is extremely valuable. So if they can get it to where he's just the fifth option, and he's just an okay player, and he's a great at what he does, he could be a very big piece to what this team goes forward, and his style of play does contribute to winning. It's just when the team isn't as good around him, and he doesn't have four other guys that are very good offensively in the starting five around him, his offensive woes and his deficiencies on the offensive side of the ball become a lot more apparent, because they need him to score, which he's just not a scorer, and he never probably will be, as we saw when they tried to force him to run point guard. But when they stopped making him run point guard during the season, he actually looked much better. So with him only being 20 years old, with him being such a good rebounder and defender already, and his offense slightly improving every year since he's joined the NBA, which is only 2 years now, I do think that maybe he could develop into the fifth or sixth option on this team once they are ready to start contending for championships, and he could be a valuable piece going forward. And then there's some honorable mentions that could possibly be somewhat influential to what this team is in the near future, or even in their long-term future. I just want to get into a few players. The first one's going to be Malachi Branham. Now, Malachi Branham has a lot of problems on the defensive end, but as just an offensive spark plug off the bench, he does have potential in that. Only 21 years old. His offense has looked very solid. He has moments where he looks extremely good. His efficiencies just need to get up, as well as his defense needs to get a little bit better as well. But with him being a guy off their bench at only 21 years old, I do think his ceiling is fairly high, and he could be a contributor going forward on this team. Trey Jones is an extremely solid, just true point guard type player, and he actually is a fairly underrated guy, and if they can get him to coming off their bench, or even just being their starting point guard but being the fifth option in their starting lineup, he can still be very valuable for this team. And like I said, he's only 24 years old, so it's not like he is about to age out of this timeline either, so he could be a fairly solid contributor, especially next year. Then Cedi Osman. Now, Cedi Osman is just a solid player. He's definitely not young by any means, but he's just a solid role player off the bench, and I think they probably should keep him around for at least 1 or 2 more years, just to have him kind of upgrade their bench, because I do think he makes them a better team. He's just a very solid player, and he's never going to really hurt you. Now, yes, he doesn't really raise the ceiling, but he's just a steady guy, which is nice to have off your bench, especially on such a young team like the San Antonio Spurs are going to be next year. Then you also have Zach Collins. Now, Zach Collins is an extremely solid center. He can start in times for you. He's extremely good, and he's only 26 years old, so he still has a little bit of growth to go, and I just think as a backup center, he could be extremely serviceable for them going forward. And then even kind of a wild card, one of their rookies from last year as well, Sidy Cissoko, who didn't really get to play much, and he played a lot in the G League. He did show improvement from the Ignite to the San Antonio Spurs G League system, and I do think he has potential, especially defensively, to be a huge contributor to this Spurs team, and he probably will get a lot more playing time going into next year. And really his only problem is the offensive question marks, but his efficiencies did improve a lot from year 1 in the G League to year 2, so hopefully he can translate that to the NBA and legitimately give them a lot of hope, because his potential is pretty high. He's a very athletic guy. He's had a lot of experience. Like I said, super athletic, very solid defender, and if his offensive game does hit like it could possibly hit, they could have an extremely solid contributor for their team for a very long time, as he is also only 20 years old. But now that we got their whole roster and really the highlights of their roster that I think could be fairly important going forward, let's actually get into some of their future ways to make this team better. And obviously the most pressing way that they're going to make this team better is going to be through the draft this season, as they currently own the number 4 and the number 8 overall picks. Now, there's a few things that they can do. I don't think they should trade these picks. I think they 100% should use these picks to select players, because a lot of people are saying this draft is super weak, which, I mean, I don't really disagree, because even in the weakest drafts, they have players that are very valuable on NBA teams. So even if this draft is quote-unquote weaker than other drafts, I do think that they still easily can find very valuable players, especially with 2 top 10 picks, and especially for the situation they currently find themselves in, because they're not trying to draft a superstar. Now, yes, that would be nice, but they're trying to draft players that they can put alongside Wembanyama to make him be a better fit and for this team to work better as a whole, and I think they're in a perfect situation to do that. So with the number 4 overall pick, probably the main options they're going to be looking at is going to be Zachary Richardson, Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepard, and Ron Holland. Now, all these players have extremely high upside, in my opinion, and I don't think you can really go wrong with any of them. And I did not put Nikola Topic here because I don't like Nikola Topic as a prospect, okay? Like, I don't think he's going to be good. So if you're a Nikola Topic fan, this isn't going to be the video for you, because I am not a fan of him, and I don't want the Spurs to pick him at all. I do think his play style would fit. I just think he has by far the lowest ceiling out of anybody that has potential to go at this number 4 overall pick, so that's why he's not going to be involved here. So what I think that they should probably do, if Ron Holland is on the board, they're definitely going to have to make a decision, because Ron Holland's ceiling is absurdly high. His defense is going to be good. His offensive ceiling is also very high, and to me, he's a more polished, basically Jonathan Kuminga coming in. Now, I wasn't very high on Jonathan Kuminga, but he is a much more polished offensive player than Kuminga was in the G League. Now, yes, his shot leaves a lot to be desired, and that is a problem, but when Wembanyama is such a good shooter from the center position, maybe that kind of deficiency he has in his game will not be shown up as much, because Wembanyama at the center position is such a good shooter, so floor spacing wouldn't matter as much from the power forward position. So if Ron Holland doesn't go number 2, 3, or 1, which is very likely, but if he doesn't, because there's a chance he falls due to his injury, they're going to have a decision to make. And in my opinion, if he is there, they should pick Ron Holland. But I think the most realistic situation at 4 is going to be either Zachary, Dillingham, or Reed Sheppard. And the fact that they have 2 guards that I really like in Dillingham and Reed Sheppard makes it more likely for them to fall to the 8th overall pick. So in my opinion, if Ron Holland is off the board, they should go with Zachary Richishire. Now, I know I'm butchering his name, but in my opinion, Zachary is an extremely solid prospect. He has very good height, very good length, a legitimate 3-level scorer. He can defend all positions. He has tons of athleticism as well, and I just think overall is going to be an extremely solid player for them, and he does feel a need at the small forward position as well, and I just think overall he would fit this team extremely well. And then with the second pick, which is pick number 8, I think they're going to be pretty much in the same situation. The only player I'm adding to the potential draft pool would be Cody Williams, but if they draft Zachary Richishire, then I don't think they would draft Cody Williams, obviously, because they kind of play the same position. So then they would be in hopefully a situation where they're picking between Rob Dillingham or Reed Sheppard. Now, in my opinion, I might be a little bit in the minority here. I love both Reed and Rob, don't get me wrong, but I think Reed Sheppard fits this team better for what they need. They need a true point guard who can also score when needed, and Reed Sheppard is exactly that. He can pass the ball, he's a great shooter, he's a very solid scorer who can score at basically all 3 levels. He can make his own shot, but he can also create for his teammates, and I think a draft of Reed Sheppard and Zachary would be unbelievable. And I think in an ideal world, ideally they would probably get Ron Holland and Reed Sheppard, but in my opinion, I think realistically they're going to end up with probably something like this. They're going to have Zachary Richishire and either Reed Sheppard and Robert Dillingham. Now, I don't think they can go wrong with either one of those guards. As long as they get Reed or Dillingham, I think they're fine at their guard position, because I think Dillingham is going to be kind of like Tyrese Maxey. So, even him, his ceiling is extremely high. I just think Reed Sheppard fits the team better. So, I think as long as they get a small forward that is Zach, Ron Holland, or even Cody Williams, along with Reed Sheppard or Rob Dillingham, this draft is going to go a very long way in making this team a lot better, and in the future, a legit finals contender. Because I think Reed Sheppard has a legit all-star potential and is going to be a great player basically no matter what. Rob Dillingham, like I said, I think he could be Tyrese Maxey. Zachary Richishire, I think, has all-star potential with how much athleticism he has. If they get Ron Holland, he has superstar potential if he hits, and I just think this draft has so much potential and so many scenarios for the San Antonio Spurs team to improve in such a high way. I think the only way they fumble it is if they draft a guy like Nikola Topic, or they just make a crazy draft pick and just completely fumble it. But with how solid the Spurs usually are at drafting, I can't imagine they fumble this draft. And I think overall, they're going to go a very long way in improving this team through the NBA draft this season. And then even to touch on the draft a little bit more, the one thing no one's really talking about, the Spurs have the 35th overall pick. Yes, that's a second round pick, but that is a very high second round pick. And you could argue it's the same thing as a late first round pick. So you can still easily get value here and fill a hole on your bench, which, and there's a ton of guys that are very solid. You could go PJ Hall, a 6'10 guy who can shoot the hell out of the ball and is extremely offensive talented and grab boards. Norchad Omier, a great hustle guy, very good defense. They have Naquan Tomlin, a 6'10, very talented power forward. You can just go so many different ways. Day'Ron Holmes, if he's available at 35, there's just so many ways that even at pick 35, they could improve this team, that this team is going to look a lot different going into next year just after the draft. And they have a potential lineup going into next season that could look like the starters being either Reed Shepherd or Dillingham at point guard, Devin Vassell at shooting guard, Keldon Johnson at small forward, Ron Holland or Zachary at power forward, and then Victor Wembanyama at center, with a bench unit that looks like Trey Jones, Malachi Branham, Seti Osman / City Suzuku, Jillian Champagny, plus whoever the 35th overall pick is if they go power forward, and then Zach Collins as their backup center. And that is a much improved team from what they were just last year, and I think the ceiling of this team for the future as well would be unbelievably high, especially if they somehow manage to pull off Ron Holland at 4. And I just think overall this team is perfectly set up to go into the future, and it's going to be one of the most exciting teams to follow going forward for a few years now. And I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you think that the San Antonio Spurs could legitimately be a super team going forward? Do you think they could be a contender? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. But unfortunately, guys, that's going to be for this video. So if you did like the point, hit the like button and subscribe button. I mean, that's the word to me. And like I said, please leave all your comments and your thoughts in the comment section below. And I hope you have a blessed day, because I had a blessed day. So you need to have a blessed day. All glory to God. See you in the next video. Goodbye. Boo. Blah.